All right, 11 minutes past 9 o'clock Central African time. There's a very interesting article that came out. Actually, it's a conversation that came out on Daily Maverick. And it's about Abadoon Oyaniran in the University of Lagos, who's actually going around and trying to empower blind students by advocating for improved accessibility and is vying for changing policies and says, okay, do we have that enough going on the African continent, a diverse and inclusive environment in our campuses and universities? While many African universities have made commitments to inclusion, gaps still remain in practice. In some cases, infrastructure is the main issue. We're always talking about infrastructure here on Channel Africa, and also learning materials and campus systems. They're not really fully designed to support students, especially those with disabilities. We look at what true inclusion on campus should look like and where universities can improve on this one. Well, we are joined by Hanif Kruger, who's a blind assistive technology specialist and disability rights advocate. Hanif, welcome on the show.
Good morning, Benjamin. Hope you're doing well.
I'm doing very well. I'd like to know a little bit more about you. What's a blind assistive technology assistant?
So I specialize in assistive technology, so that would be basically the devices, hardware, software solutions that would assist a person to function optimally, depending on what it is that they want to accomplish. And this is from the initial stage of assessment, needs analysis, right up to after the fact, after purchase, servicing, and so on. But I used to, I basically was involved in policies. Universal design is one of the things I always push for. So what you're talking about is right up my alley. But yeah, that's basically what I do. I try and assist people in my personal capacity as well as professional capacity, whenever I can, wherever I can, however I can.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Such a good thing to be doing, man. And if let's talk a little bit about the story that we're reading in the Daily Maverick around Abiodun Oyaniran. Interesting, because when you read his story, it's really about someone who is got a disability, and when they are around their university, that's when they see, this is a bit of a challenge. This is very much a struggle. And when they get into that, that's when they start advocating. And that's what's happening in most systems when it comes to people with disabilities, is that it's only when they get into those environments where they have to then advocate for themselves.
Yeah. So, Benjamin, I'm going to, take it a bit further and say it's not just the environment. It's not just the infrastructure. It's also attitudinal.
Okay.
Because the biggest challenge for anybody with any sort of challenge at universities is not just a disability, but it's the environment and then that attitude. So when campuses and learning materials and digital systems are designed without accessibility in mind, then students spend their energy to try and overcome these barriers instead of actually focusing on the material that they're supposed to be looking at and dealing with. The biggest challenge here is, from a blindness perspective, would be obviously navigation. Many of these places were not designed with people with disabilities in mind, whether it's wheelchair or blind. So lecture halls may not have tactile signs. Pathways may not have indicators. Building can be difficult to navigate. You know how big some of these campuses can be. So just navigating to a class could be absolutely terrifying for a person that's totally blind, doesn't have friends, doesn't know anybody. When they plan their campuses without accessibility in mind, then they have to rely on other people. And we can extend this concept to learning material as well. Because if a document is not accessible, then it doesn't only affect the blind person, but it affects other people as well. It could affect technology down the line as well. But if a blind person takes a document, okay, you my lecturer, I'm coming to you, I'm saying, Benjamin, I need this, you're giving me a scanned copy of something. Other students can open the document and start learning immediately. They can absorb what they're seeing with immediacy. I have to now go and ask Palesa, Sis Palesa, please, can you help me? And maybe she'll say, I don't know what to do, but I can read this for you. And now I record it, and she makes a mistake, she gets tired, and we have an argument, and then basically I'm struggling still to absorb this information, while other students are already done with absorbing this information.
Yeah.
So true inclusion, this is so, for me, it comes from up the policies. When they procure items, when they procure these platforms, it should be built into the contractual agreements, into the purchase orders. It should be built into policy right from the outset. Because if accessibility becomes a catchphrase with every semester, that means the student will only do as well as they are able to speak for themselves. So if they're not able to advocate for themselves, they are shy, they're new, it means they just get left behind.
We obviously think of universities as learning environments, Hanif. And when we think about persons with disabilities, we think the only challenges they have are infrastructural. So ramps for those who are in wheelchairs and, some of the things you mentioned for those with the blind and, many other infrastructure issues. But the truth is this really does have huge challenges on their ability to learn as well. Connect those dots for us, please, because many might not understand how a ramp could affect your studies if you are a university student.
Well, it's obviously just an example that you're giving, because it's absolutely anything. It could be a lecturer who decides that he's not going to make a PDF accessible, or even a publisher who says, well, we don't care. You paid 500 Rand for this book, you have it, we don't care whether you can access it or not, it's your problem. But it affects a person on a social level, that they might feel that, I've been at this place for 2 years and I'm not making it, I'm not doing well, I'm not making friends, and I'm going to touch on that also in a moment. But it affects them because they feel they cannot meaningfully contribute to the university, to society itself, because they were not able to make it. And people do make it sometimes. But I'm going to say this, and I know I'm going to rock the boat sometimes, in this case. But sometimes people make it. In many cases, they are privileged. They have wealth behind them. Maybe they have somebody who sponsored them. And so they are lucky. They might be financially capable of doing these things, to go to university, to have somebody walk with them, take them from class to class. But everybody do not have that. And in Africa, if you look at a Pan-African perspective, I want to also say this. We should not only wait for infrastructure. If we show kindness to other people, just attitudinal, there are people that I know that has done so well for themselves, not despite the universities, despite the inaccessibility. Yeah. That's why I'm saying attitude is such a big differentiating factor that we have to keep in mind.
Well, Hanif, we're going to take a bit of a break, and then we'll come back to those attitudes that need to be changed. It seems like you're putting that fact forward here beyond the idea of even infrastructure, as much as infrastructure is a challenge. How do we change the way of seeing people with disabilities? How do we become inclusive in even our communities in these universities? We'll unpack that after the break. We're speaking to Hanif Kruger, who is a blind assistive technology assistant and disability rights advocate. What's your take on this conversation we're having today? People with disabilities and education, do you think we do enough to accommodate them? Our WhatsApp number is +27 83 288 6684. It's 20 minutes past 9 o'clock Central African time. Stay with us right here on Channel Africa.
Using Scholar Transport comes with responsibilities. Every learner has a role to play in keeping themselves, their friends, and the driver safe. Stay seated and behave responsibly. Avoid shouting, pushing, standing, or moving around inside the vehicle at any time. Think safety first. Remember that safety starts before the journey begins and continues until you are safely off the road. Good behavior saves lives. Your actions matter. Issued by the National Department of Transport.
Hi there. Do you want to elevate your business and give it a voice in South Africa and Africa as a whole? Well, in that case, let Channel Africa make this a possibility. Channel Africa is willing to advertise your business for as little as 30,000 rands or $1,719.18. To get access to these great rates, send all requests to mokoenata@SABC. That's MOKOENATA@SABC. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Benjamin Mushatama and Palisatawo on the move.
We're having this important conversation this morning with Hanif Kruger, blind assistive technology specialist and disability rights activist, speaking about accessibility in universities for persons living with disabilities. It's a great space for learning and growing. However, if you live with a disability and not enough accessibility, both physical and sometimes even learning accessibilities made possible for you, it could really hurt your studies quite immensely. Hanif, let's speak about that, the attitudes of people. I think I've driven around a number of campuses throughout my life, and in some campuses I do see, implementations of accessibility in the physical form, like a blind person's crossing, but the cars never stop, they just keep on moving. And so it's not just the university's problem, it's about the community and the environment. Do people actually know how to be part of that inclusion and accessibility within the community of a campus?
I'm going to try and answer this by saying this, that not only universities, but many places they're trying hard. And in the cases of universities, disability support officers, they try to, they work very hard. But the problem is that disability is still treated as an individual accommodation instead of a systemic responsibility. So this means that people with disabilities sometimes have to repeatedly request for accessible materials or adjustments for each course every time, every semester. And that can become exhausting because students end up spending time advocating instead of focusing on their studies. So it should be built systems from the beginning, procurement policies, digital platforms, and teaching practices, rather than being added on later as an afterthought. Now, where I'm going to answer your question here, Palesa, is if we talk about societal responsibility, let kids mix with one another from a young age. Preschool. Let them mix, let them introduce, let them meet different groups of disabilities. Let the special schools stop being special and just run around and interact, play sports, do wrestling, play blind tennis or whatever it is, do things, talk to one another. And also within our cultures, we have to acknowledge there is a lot of issues around disability, a lot of stigmatism and so on. We need to embrace that also and try and deal with that so people don't have to be scared of disability. I once did a presentation. I won't say the name of the company. It's one of the parastatals, though. It was quite funny. And the guy said, I used to see you, Mr. Kruger, on the Gautrain, but every time I saw you, I went and got in another carriage because I thought I'll also become blind. And we laughed, but he was a manager. And that's, he really thought that this was the case. And disability, I'm going to say this, it can happen to anybody. I met people, 27 years old, one morning she wakes up, I'm blind. Or 13 years old, one morning wakes up, I cannot see that well anymore. So it can happen to us any time of the day or night that we can acquire this disability in whichever way, accidental, hereditary, whatever the case is. And we, at all of us, at some point in our lives, we have a disability. Sometimes maybe you lose a loved one. Mentally, you become overwhelmed. Maybe you broke your arm or your leg. Something happened. So we all need accommodation, and we need to implement that Ubuntu. People love to talk about Ubuntu, but I think if we implement these things in globally, locally in Africa, South Africa, I think we will actually resolve many of these problems.
Yeah. You know, I'm going back to this article of this
Yes.
Daily Maverick radio workshop story that kind of led us to speak about this. It's on Abiodun Oyaniran, who is at the University of Lagos. And what happened here with this blind student is that they even started advocating within that university and started what they call Children of Selflessness, a group that helps blind students take exams by reading questions aloud and submitting even their papers. You know, the small little things that we can do as community members or even as part of a cohort, whether it's in a school, whether it's in a business environment, or even just within a religious community, to be of assistance. At times we don't know how to be of assistance. What I've been self-critical on sometimes when I see someone who has a disability, I don't want to engage too much because I don't want to assume that they don't know how to do the things that I assume they don't know to do, right? So then I just switch off and just carry on with my life and just like, okay, they're fine. But maybe that's also part of the problem, is that we have those separate worlds between the abled and the disabled, and we never try to understand one another. How do we engage more? How do we participate more in each other's lives?
I think it's because of fear. And what I said earlier on, like suggesting that schools, churches, people just reach out, you know, like what we're doing right now. This is one of the things maybe we should talk more often. You know, I've actually heard you, by the way, on I think on one of the other radio stations before, Benjamin. So I know your voice. But
sure,
I think it's just taking that first step, overcoming that fear of otherness. And that fear of initial contact. Like, I get what you're saying. Sometimes I walk past people and they speak Chinese and I ignore them because I think they might not be able to speak English, but then actually they can speak English, but I assumed that they couldn't. So it's just about reaching out, moving out of your comfort zone, and then saying, hey, are you okay? Do you need help? And you're going to find people who might be offended. So, leave me alone. I can do it myself. But then not everybody is the same. People might appreciate that you're reaching out to them and say, hey, do you need any help? My name is Benjamin, and so forth and so on. So that's, I think, just reaching out and taking that first step. If I may, though, Benjamin, I know other people might be listening, and I think it's important, if we have some time, just to touch on a few steps that the universities can take.
Okay,
I
go
think
for
just
it.
to be practical.
Sure.
So I think, first of all, they need to ensure that digital learning platforms and course materials are compatible with screen readers and other assistive technologies. So if they implement universal design, no problem. And these systems are there. That is the sad fact. They are accessible systems, but many times universities and companies will use the most inaccessible system, or a system, just the first system that they like. Then the second thing is to provide basic accessibility training to lecturers so they know how to create accessible documents and presentations. It's really easy. It's simple. There's tons of material, free, online, and obviously they can also find people who do training and who actually can help them to implement this properly. The next one is to include accessibility requirements in documentation when universities purchase new technology or digital systems. So this will future-proof the university, not only for blindness, but for any other sort of, maybe you want to be able to extract a text and you might want to put it, input into a storage system or something. So if it's an image form, it's not always ideal because you cannot really search as well as opposed to using text. But then the final thing, most importantly, is to involve students with disabilities and students without disabilities. Let them interact with one another, get organizations involved who are specialists, and let them be involved right from the outset. Because at the end of the day, accessibility should never, ever depend on how much a student is willing to fight for it. It should already be built into the system.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more, Hanif. Thank you so much for your time. I think that's a great way to wrap it up. Where can we go to find you?
Well, they can always just email me. Very simple email address is mail@hanif.co. And if they want to WhatsApp me, I only do text and only voice on appointment. 061 229 4455.
Thank you so much. That's Hanif Kruger, blind assistive
Thank you for having me.
technology specialist and disability rights advocate. What a pleasure to speak to you. Really important conversation there, speaking about accessibility for persons with disabilities in universities across the continent. That's 9:30 Central Africa time. Let's get our latest sports update.
Sport.